I believe I speak for all of us. We will all sleep again without this vermin.
Vermin. Corsican thug. A man who's so great but has no manners. We can't really say, right, this Napoleon is a great Napoleon. In this History Police review video, I would like to make it like a thorough, detailed and honest review of the movie for you. So I have to warn you, there will be some spoilers. So if you haven't watched the movie or you really want to, maybe start with my ultimate guide, because this video is not included in it. And then you can go and watch this video and tell me what you think. In this video, I will talk about historical inaccuracies, but it's not going to be my main focus because I've discussed it in the trailers, but also because, you know, there are a lot of controversy around the topic with Sir Ridley Scott taking it so personally. I'm still going to point out a few things that I think are a bit unbearable for historians, and it would have been so easy for Sir Ridley Scott to fix without any problems for the story of his movie. I'm then going to discuss the movie itself, the pace of the movie, what I thought was working and was not working. I'm going to discuss the portrayal by Joaquin Phoenix. I'm going to discuss the relationship with Josephine again. And I made a video about this, the real story, but I would like to discuss here the dynamic between the two actors. And then I will end with my feeling. Is it an anti-French movie? Is Napoleon movie of 2023 truly anti-French? So watch until the end. First of all, what you have to know is that when you start the movie, you start in 1789 with the revolution. You have Marie Antoinette and her children being scared in the palace, being followed and being arrested. And you start right off then with 1793 with her execution, where she's defiant, but also you can see she's very scared. We see that she has her hair that is not cut, so that's the first big historical inaccuracy that you can see. She had her head chopped off for the guillotine. The second big historical inaccuracy is obviously that Napoleon witnessed her execution when he was not there. So in the first kind of like 2-3 minutes, you already have a very rush pace of the movie with 1, 2, 3 historical inaccuracies. And that's okay. I mean, in many ways, it's, you know, creative license and everything. But my problem really is that it does not bring anything to the movie to have these historical inaccuracies. Having Marie Antoinette does not bring anything. I think it's to link with then the balls of survivors where, you know, Napoleon is going to meet Josephine, who has short hair because she's also a survivor of the French Revolution. So I think it's a link here. They could have just focused on Josephine's story and start with it and her husband and how her husband was, you know, executed during the Reign of Terror of Robespierre. So here I think really we're missing so many opportunities to make it accurate and to make it good. The movie really follows through with then, you know, it's after the terror. So you have like the first, I don't know, it sounds like so crazy short. You have the French Revolution, you have the Reign of Terror, you have the end of Robespierre. The end of Robespierre is sorted in like, you know, almost 10 seconds. I'm exaggerating here, but it's very like, you know, butchered and compressed, which is fine because the movie is not on Robespierre, but I'm just explaining to you that then you don't really have a feeling of what Napoleon felt. You don't really have how he came from Corsica to go to Paris. You don't really have how he embraced first the Republic. You don't have how he embraced first, you know, the Reign of Terror at first, and then decided to really kind of distance himself with it. It's just so compressed that there's no understanding of the formative years of Napoleon. And for me, you can't really understand Napoleon's greatness. You can't really understand Napoleon's ambitions without understanding these first years that are so formative. Then he's right off sent to Toulon. And then again, this is another big historical inaccuracies. He wins in Toulon, so that's a victory for him. But the way he's done it, you know, Dan Snow said it, on his social platforms and on radio and on TV, that it was very hard for him, a military historian, to watch and see that, Napoleon just fired at the Royal Navy, British Royal Navy, as if it was that easy to reconquer Toulon. So again, here we make it like such a short, compressed time of a victory. That was a victory, but it's not the fact, in the end, it's not, is it really accurate or is not accurate? It's the fact that you don't really have a sense of the growing ambition, the pursuit for glory in that movie. You don't have this at all. And so then, you keep moving on, and it's very quick. It moves so quickly. It's just that it's very, very hard to make a movie about Napoleon in 2.5, almost 3 hours. In terms of historical inaccuracies, it just continues. You have the relationship, and I'm going to say more, between Napoleon and Josephine that, for me, doesn't work. I don't see the chemistry. It's just squashed and very hard to follow in between the life of Napoleon. You have, his victories. There's some stuff that I understand why Ridley Scott chose to do it that way. Egypt is completely butchered, not just because he fires at the pyramid, and that's massively historically inaccurate, but because, yes, he won a battle, but at the end, the British and the Ottomans made an alliance against him, and you don't have this. In the movie, they pretend that he just goes back to Paris because of his marital affairs, and I'm not going to say more. But actually, it's much more complicated than that. So that was really, all this stuff have really rubbed me the wrong way when I was watching the movie. One thing that I found extremely annoying, and that's maybe because I watch the trailers too many times to make my videos and my reactions on the 2 trailers that were released before, but it's that, the lines that are put in the trailer are put in certain scenes that are not the same scenes in the movie. So I was like, okay, so he didn't say that at that moment, he said it at another moment. And I was like, I really didn't understand why they would do something like that. And that is something that just confused me. Because, I said in my trailer 2 reaction that he said, oh, shh, which country are we in? Oh yeah, mine. And in the movie, it's not what he says. He says, shh, which country are we in? We're in France and I can't recognize it. And you're failing. And he's talking to the directory and he's going to force them to kind of resign.
Whose country are we in? Mine.
It's a coup d'etat. And it just doesn't make any sense because that line, which country are we in? Oh yeah, mine, was so iconic for me of what Napoleon would say, and here it was completely taken away from the movie. It's not what he said in the movie, it's what he said in the trailer. So really confusing. The scene as well that I really liked when he took power and he says shall we vote? All the stuff happening before, we see him not the strong man who takes power. We see how he fights. He almost fights like a guy. Somewhere he's trying to punch people. He's a bit sometimes ridiculous in this movie. And it was kind of just hard to watch. Just because I thought, how are we supposed to believe that Scott's Napoleon really has the essence of the real Napoleon who conquered the territories he conquered, but also who did everything he did. And either you see him as a legend or a tyrant, but you still need a glimpse of grandeur to do that, a glimpse of achievement, of success. And it's really each time brushed aside almost. And it's where I'm going to go with also the performance of Joaquin Phoenix. Lots of people have commented on my videos on a Napoleon movie or Napoleon and said that, Joaquin Phoenix, too old. And I dismissed it because I thought Phoenix had the essence of Napoleon. Now, I watched the movie in full and I'm like, yeah, maybe you were right. There is something where you just don't understand how this man is basically the same age in Toulon, the same age in Egypt, the same age, when he's crowned emperor, the same age at Waterloo, right? Like there's just no effort. So that's one thing. But also it plays with the chemistry with Vanessa Kirby. Josephine is supposed to be older. That is why at some point she can't give him children anymore. And that is one of the reasons for their divorce, not just that. Here we don't have it. Because she looks way younger. So we don't have that dynamic at all. My problem as well with the way Napoleon is depicted. So I liked it. There's some bits that I like. The fact that he's probably like a bit vulnerable. And I think you see the man behind, the name, if you want. The man behind the success. But at the same time, there is a bit of ridicule around that. There is a bit of him being awkward. And maybe he would have been. But because there's not enough, time spent on explaining his true rise, an epic rise to power, people just find him awkward. He's just a very awkward, old Napoleon. And that doesn't really work into what we know of Napoleon, what we know from the sources. And again, I wasn't there. Ridley Scott wasn't there, you weren't there, but we have those sources. And somehow these sources are like completely ignored. And you don't have like this I don't mind the awkwardness, I don't mind the vulnerability, because at the end of the day he was a man like any other man. He says he's built different, but that's not entirely true as well. Because he has his own fears, he has his own insecurities. At some point he says he has no insecurities. Of course he does, like everyone did. But he was driven for something. The things that also really kind of bugged me as well is so the dynamic is really, and the center is also on him and Josephine, which why not? So there's lots of their letters in the movie, which I think works well. But because it's just focusing on that, we have Josephine saying, "You're nothing without me." And as soon as they're no longer together, which you should know, so it's not a real spoiler, they have a divorce because she can't give him a miller. Then you see his decline in his glory, in his career. And I think I think the way it is shown is like, oh yes, he was really nothing without her. That's how I took it. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I felt when I was watching it. And I thought oh, that's a very kind of a, reduced view of what actually happened. The bits I liked were when he tries to actually have peace, when he says he's not a man of ambition, that he's being attacked, so he has to fight back. But you also have moments where you see his ego taking place and how he can shout at people and how he can be very violent and aggressive. So I think here we really have, there are some bits of the representation, the portrayal that works well for Napoleon. Now the question that everyone has been asking, especially in France, is it an anti-French movie? I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go into the fact that it is anti-French to be anti-French, but I can see why it can be a bit insulting to reduce one of the biggest, I'm not going to say greatest, because I think Napoleon can be massively criticized. There are thousands and thousands of books on him, and they're all not glorious, and they reassess him and his reign and his personality and all of this. But either you like him or not, he's one of the biggest historical figures that have influenced and impacted Europe and France. And we don't talk about this. We don't talk what he brought to France, what he destroyed in France, especially what I said in my video on Napoleon, the real Napoleon, women's rights, but at the same time he brought the civil code. So there's lots of things that he made changes. And I think in that movie, you see the military genius, you see the military leader with Austerlitz, for example, or Toulon was too annoying to watch. But you don't really kind of understand the political leader. And he truly was. There's also like some bits at the end where, you know, he's sent to Elba, he comes back, you don't understand why he comes back. You don't really understand what's happening. You don't understand how his men rallied around him. And also, obviously, there's Waterloo. Waterloo, obviously, it's a big defeat for the French. The French are humiliated. But again, because of how I think Napoleon is portrayed, you don't really understand the ultimate respect that the British had for him, because they don't execute him, they send him to exile. And you don't really understand what's happening, why it is happening, because the depiction of him is not as great as it could have been. You don't really understand the legend. Yeah, I think that's my problem. You know, when you look at the trailer, there was like the tyrant, they touch upon all of this, but they don't really touch upon the legend. And that makes it very hard to understand the legacy of Napoleon. Why are we still talking about him? Why are we still making movies about him? Why are we still writing about him? But also, why he had the fate he had. And so all of this made me feel like not really anti-French, but there's definitely something that's quite not right in the portrayal of Napoleon. It's definitely not a movie that I would recommend for if you wanted to know about history. Obviously, it's a movie, it's not a documentary. I hope it will spark interest for you to want to know more about Napoleon, even, you know, to criticize him. I'm not against it at all. I don't think that Napoleon is a soul and heart and head of France. I don't think here we have a very believable portrayal of Napoleon. And that is where I'm a bit disappointed in the movie. Now, if I'm also honest, I found it like so condensed that, you know, you go from he's crowned, he's this, oh boom, he's exiled. It should have been a longer movie. It should have been maybe a TV show with 10 episodes or something. And I really believe that I needed a historical consultant team. You allowed with historical fiction to have your creative license, and you're allowed to have your own representation of historical figures. But when it's like butchered that way, when you try to condense so much, and when you don't even like try to make people understand the epic rise of Napoleon, then you're missing the point of what your movie should be about. And that's my view. That's how I felt when I watched it. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. That's my honest and thorough review of the movie Napoleon. And you can watch my other videos on Napoleon if you're interested in that topic. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!